they will be talking about HTML and HTML5. So what is HTML? HTML is an abbreviation for Hypertext Markup Language. Let's get the T here as well. Hypertext Markup Language. So this goes back to the ancient times of typewriter machines, and when they were typewriting things, they were marking them up as well. This means there were markups in the text that is being typed with typewriters as to colors, fonts, and other important information about the text and the format of the text. So it's text that is being marked up. So this means that in HTML we have these tags which allow us to mark the text as in to specify formatting such as color, font, size of font, bold, italic, or even including pictures and sounds onto our web page, that is inserting image and specifying where exactly on the screen this image should be located and how large is the image, so that it allows us to format what is on our page. So it has to do with formatting the web page. Now, we said format marking up text. How about hypertext? What is hypertext? So that would be the links or URLs, uniform resource locators. So parts of the text into the web pages would be clickable, that is, it'll appear in blue color, be underlined, and we know that we can click on those. And what do they do when we click on them? They take us somewhere else, to another page, to another resource. So they're called URLs, Uniform Resource Locators. This means they allow us to determine where the resource is located and how to access it. So hyper means URL, Uniform Resource Locator, where the resource is. And what is the name of resource? Where the resource is, and how to access it. So those three questions are answered by the URL. So, for example, let's move this. Can we move this? For example, what is the name of the resource? Index.html. That's a name. That's the name of a page we would like to access. where the resource is. Now, other things could be part of the name, for example. It could be in certain directory. The entire path to the file we would like to access is part of the file name. Where is it? So find a better color here. Where is it? So the domain name system will allow us to know where it is. So it will be something like google.com or apple.com or myuniversity.edu. This allows us to know where it is. So if this was, let's say, Westcliff University, the name Westcliff University translates to IP address. Let's say 192.168.1.1. This address is an actual address that can take us where the resource physically, geographically is located. This is just like I live in Irvine, California. That's an address that shows, hey, this university is in Irvine, California, and that is how you're gonna get to it from your location. You're gonna go through all of these routers and follow these routes, and your network connection will get connected to this university. That is, it tells us where it is, okay? And the last question that we have to answer is, we know what we want to answer. We know what we want to access. We want to access index.html. We know where it is. It's on this address. It's in Irvine, California. And then how we're going to access this. So we're going to access it through a specific protocol. The protocol tells us how we're going to access it. So a certain protocol needs to be followed to access the resource. This protocol just means that the client and the server machine or the user and the programmer, for example, need to speak the same language. Say they speak English language. There is certain protocol that's followed in English language. First of all, I say hello to the other person, then I say my name, and then I can ask them, can you give me this index HTML, because that's what I want from you. So there is a protocol of how we're going to talk to each other and what is acceptable to say. Well, first we have to say hello and say our name, and then we can ask for what we want. That's a protocol. So protocol is a rules of how the communication should proceed. So the client and server machine, in this case browser and web server, need to speak the same language. So they have to agree what language they speak, English or Hypertext Transfer Protocol language, HTTP. So they're gonna use this protocol to talk to each other, and then both of them agree on this protocol and let's say they will use version 1.1. Both of them know this version, they recognize it. When the network connection is established, they agree we're going to use Hypertext Transfer Protocol version 1.1. Both of us understand this language, and that's how we're going to speak to each other. Okay, so protocol is used here. That is a set of rules for how the communication should proceed. So, for example, HTTP protocol can be used. There are others. Doesn't need to be that one. It can be FTP over here. It can be FTP, right? It can be mail too. There's all kinds of things that it can be. Whatever the protocol is, both of the parties need to agree to use that protocol because it defines how they will be talking to each other. So the hyperlink really is quite an involved. The uniform resource locator is quite an involved technology that has to answer those three questions to make those links work. And when we click on them. Alright, so this language, not only that it contains texts and formatting of the texts, but it contains links, these URLs, uniform resource locators. That's why it's called text but hypertext, because it can take us from one document to another, which are part of the web of linked documents. That's why it's called World Wide Web. So the web just means that they are documents which are linked and are all linked up together in this web, kind of like a spider web. Okay, so that the HTML contains formatting and links. It can have other things as well, other than text and links. Like we said, it can have pictures, text, links, pictures, sounds. So it's formatting of all these things, so to make the page appear on the screen properly formatted. All right, so let's look at these HTML files now. We have file name extensions of either a .htm or HTML whenever these pages are written in this HTML language. So they are ASCII files. What is ASCII? This is the English language. the way the keyboard is, keys are defined and saved in binary, right, in a computer. Each key on the keyboard has a specific code. I think it's like 7 bits. For the keys onto the keyboard, just basically means it's English text, okay? And then we have the HTML first, and really the World Wide Web concept was developed by Tim Berners-Lee. This means web of linked documents. And it was released in 1989 free to use with no copyright restrictions. That's why it gave birth to what we know today as the World Wide Web and even the internet, which the internet is different than the World Wide Web. That needs to be noted here. So, gave birth to World Wide Web and internet. The World Wide Web is an application. The internet is a network. So just want to make that clear. These two things are different, okay? The World Wide Web is just an application that runs on top of the network. Okay. This one is a wide area network. Make it yellow. Right, so this is pretty much the father of the World Wide Web and the internet structure that we see today. Back then, he didn't know any of that. He was just like, believe working in a physics lab, and he just wanted to link a bunch of scientific documents, and he got this idea of, hey, when we read books, it's just a text that we flip from one page to another, and the pages go in sequence. Page 1, read page 2, read page 3. What if we don't go into sequence? What do we want to have? Something more intuitive, like the way our brain works, the way our thoughts work. They don't go in sequence from page 1 to page 2. We think about pizza, and all of a sudden, the pizza links our thoughts to the Coca-Cola because we have pizza with Coca-Cola and we enjoyed that. So somehow the human brain links from one thought to another related thought, and it jumps from one thought to another based on those relations. So that's how he got the idea of these hyperlinks. Hey, we're gonna have a web page or a text document. In this case, it was physics, scientific research in physics, that links to another document because they are related, and we can jump in between documents back and forth or jump to a third document from the second one, like this. And it is in more a lot more intuitive way and closer to the way brain works. So we can link from one page to another. That was his idea, and this was a brilliant idea that it gave birth to this web of linked documents. And initially it was just linking a couple of universities with some scientific documents, and then because what? Because it was free to use with no copyright restrictions, it quickly grew and expanded itself and spanned more and more universities, eventually spanned companies and businesses, and personal pages were added, and many networks were connected together to form this big wide area network known as the internet, where this web application is now running. So it expanded tremendously over the next few decades. So let's see the HTML history now, what happened. So there was something called XHTML for extension or more advanced type of HTML back in the year 2000, that it created a newer standards. They didn't turn to be used very well. It also incorporated a support for the extensible markup language XML. And this XHTML wasn't that much different from the regular HTML. So it was still called HTML, wasn't anything like a whole new language in its own. The first version, called XHTML1, was standard for some time. And then out of the standard, the next version that came out because of some company competition. So there were two competing groups, spent several years working on competing standards. The first one was the HTML5, and the other one XHTML2. So that were the next versions that came after the XHTML1. So competition is nothing pleasant, right? When we have competing companies or industries. but that's what gave birth to the following versions. Because of these competitions, these two groups worked for several years to try to develop those new standards, and we ended up with the new standards. The XHTML was the first one. So the XHTML group authorized by the World Wide Web Consortium, which is a standard and important resource that defines what the World Wide Web is, and it is worldwide recognized. So this consortium insisted that XHTML2 is no longer HTML, but it is a whole new language on its own. Some of these were presented at professional companies, conferences, professional research conferences. So even though the XML2 is pretty much very similar to the HTML, it is not fully backward compatible. Now let's look at the HTML5. In 2004, a Berners-Lee group reintroduced the idea of evolving HTML4 into HTML5. The World Wide Web 3 consortium, because they were dealing with the other thing, the XHTML2, they rejected the proposal and they continue with the XHTML instead. There were a couple of private companies developing browsers. At that time, Mozilla, that's the Firefox, and Opera were popular browsers. So these guys, along with the Tim Berners-Lee group, formed a group that continued the development of the HTML5, even though the standard World Wide Web 3 consortium authority for the World Wide Web, so to speak, even though they were rejecting their proposal. The reason that they continued to do this is because they wanted to make sure that the technologies can be backwards compatible. Because there were really a lot of older pages out on the web, and we wanted to make sure all of it still works, even though we are developing these new HTML version technologies. So the HTML, based on that idea, the development of the HTML5 continued through the years. So in 2006, there was a noted progress as the authority, the consortium, agreed to recognize this technology and to support it. And then in 2010, Microsoft Corporation joined the development of the HTML5. So we have more industry supports. In addition to Apple was developing it, now Microsoft wanted to develop it as well. Apple and the browser companies. And then so it's just getting wider support there from the industries. And there in 2011, the World Wide Web 3 consortium abandoned the idea of the XHTML2 and decided to make the HTML5 the standard for the World Wide Web. So the major browser companies developing browsers encompass this idea. And so now the newest browsers that we have in the 2020 years are supporting this HTML5 technology. Here we can find on this link what HTML5 is and what are the definitions for it as a hypertext markup language. So what it does, it supports graphic effects like filters, rounded corners, enhanced transparencies. It has a standard sections. For example, the HTML5 pages would have a navigation bar and a footer. And then it uses something called scalable vector graphics, so that it allows for vector and raster images the same as they're defined in the extensible markup language to be incorporated into the HTML. So it allows for certain scripts to be written for this kind of images. And then it allows for drawings. So there is a drawing screen. So this kind of features are the more important thing about HTML5, as well as native animation and video is supported. So we have video tag, we have canvas tag. And the HTML5, as we mentioned, is now accepted by the authorities as the standard language for the World Wide Web. So that is what we have today for HTML5 and the HTML history.